tell me a little bit about first of all, kind of where you were when you were born, and kind of the circumstances. Just anything you tell me.
Okay, I was born in Hennepin County, Minneapolis, 1924, and I was about a year and a half old. We moved to Wisconsin, Amory, Wisconsin, which would be up by Goose Lake, and that was on a farm, dairy farm, and I went to school at Goose Lake School, which was about a mile and a half away. We had to walk there all the time, and I took a lot of. And in the evenings, we always had to do chores at home, of course. And then I went from grade school to trade school at the NYH school by St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin, and that was for machinist and welding. And when I finished that course, they sent me down to Racine, where I worked in an aircraft factory, and I was a machinist, worked on a machine that made bearings for aircraft, big bombers.
Do you remember about what year that would have been?
That would have been about in 41, 42, somewhere along there. And then I got my notice that Uncle Sam wanted me. So I went into the Army, and I went down to Fort Chardon, Illinois. That's where the induction center was, and did all our physicals and that kind of stuff, where you gotta, bend over and spread your cheeks and that kind of thing, and stick out your tongue, and they felt you, and you felt alive, so you passed. See. And then they shipped me down to Fort Riley, Kansas. And that was in CRTC, that's Cavalry Replacement Training Center. And we were there for 14 weeks, training for, we understood that we was going to go to India, and where they used horses. Yeah, for what, I don't know, but and then after 14 weeks of that, then they shipped me to Camp Butler, North Carolina. And we were there for about, a month or two, month and a half. And then they shipped me to Fort Meade, Maryland. And there we finished up our basic courses in all kinds of guns that we'd be using. And then they gave us a 7 days vacation, a week leave, to go home and come back, see. And I didn't have enough money to get home, so I called the folks, and they sent me money that would be at the Chicago train depot, and I could pick it up there to go the rest of the way. So that went a few days at home and a few days around the Goose Lake area, and back to camp again. And then we were shipped to.
Can I interrupt? We're getting a little noise from that here.
Oh,
and we can always refer to it back again. But you're doing great. You're doing great. And I just want to make sure, just being we got a little break anyhow. Awesome. Okay, and let me just make sure. Great. Okay.
Then we were 100 of us, special service, were loaded onto an aircraft tender. That's a supply ship for the aircraft carrier. And we went down to Bermuda, where they picked up the aircraft carrier and 7 destroyers. And then we had a full convoy ready to go to Africa. So then we, next 7 days, we're on the way to Casablanca.
How old would you have been at this time then? You were
Only 18.
You were 18. Wow. 18. Okay.
Yeah. And then
So
we
that's
got in, just outside of Africa, I was, I suppose about 50 miles, there was a German submarine they sighted. And they blew that up, and then we went on into Casablanca. And there was in another camp, Camp Dawn Passage. That was the last training camp, and that camp was training us for fighting in Africa in the deserts. And we were there about, I suppose maybe 6 weeks. And then they shipped us up to Oran, which is in the northern coast of Africa. And that's where we were loaded on the boats again onto LSTs, that's LCSs, Landing Craft Infantry. And they were boats that were about 75 feet long and probably 20 feet wide. And they had a rope ladder over the side that you had to get up to get off the boat with. And the Navy laid down a smoke screen ahead of us so they couldn't see us coming. And then we landed into Naples, Italy. And then we stayed there for a short time, maybe a week. And then we were got our orders that we was going to go to beach landing at Anzio Beach. And while we were loading in Naples, Mount Vesuvius erupted, and we could see that from Naples. That was really something to see. And anyhow, we got on the boats then, and then they went up to Anzio and made a landing there, and we stayed there for, I imagine it must have been 2.5, 3 months by the time they got that all cleaned up. And the next drive was to Rome. And then, on the way to Rome, we went on land now. We were going up the mountains or hills before you could get into Rome. And just as you got started going up the hills, we couldn't keep up with the tanks, because the tanks were we was attached to the 1st Armored Division. And we were in the 34th American Infantry Division. Then they said for us to 10 men on each tank, call up on top of them, and then we could keep up with the convoy. So when we got up to the top of the mountain there then, they stopped the tanks and asked us to all get off because they were going to start firing. And at this time, they stopped the tank at about a 45 degree, or maybe not that, maybe 30 degree. And the reason for that is if somebody shoots an artillery shell at them, it'd ricochet off, and unless artillery shell hit on the point, it won't go off, see? So I got off and got down in the rear end of the tank, and when I got on the ground, an artillery shell landed right where I hit the tank and ricocheted off and landed where I was. And that's the first time I got wounded. And then,
When you got wounded, did people come and kind of help you out of there then, or how did that?
oh yeah. Then the medics, they come and pick up the wounded patients.
And then you got taken somewhere for a while?
Yeah, I was taken back to to Naples, where the general hospital was for till they got me patched up again, and then they sent you back up to your outfit again. And then the next thing we went to Pisa. The next front was on before we get into Pisa.
Okay, can you hold just a second? I'm going to pause it for a second. And start it up again. Sorry for the interruption there. So you were injured for the first time, and then you went back.
Went back to the front again.
Okay, talk. Okay.
And then we went to that was in Rome. And of course, by the time I got back up to the outfit, my company again, why they had Rome, taken Rome over, see. And of course, we had a little rest area time there in Rome when we got to see the St. Peter's Cathedral and that big stadium. What do you call it?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The Roman
Colosseum.
Colosseum. Yeah.
Colosseum. We went through that, and a lot of things in Rome that are interesting to see. And when we got to north of Rome, we seen that where there was a railroad gun that had been shooting down on us, and we were on Anzio, over the mountain with it, see? And it was nicknamed the Anzio Express, because it was a 12-inch shell that they were shooting, see? And that'd go over the mountains and then down into where we were. And we called that the Anzio Express. Well, then we got north side of Rome, still in Rome, we could see this here railroad gun sitting there. That was interesting to see, although it wasn't at the time we were in Anzio. But then the next, then of course we'd already been to Anzio, and we went to Pisa, and that was Florence. Florence was the next battle that was inland, and that was across up on the mountains, High Sierra Mountains there, and went on a patrol and behind the front lines, and you got information for the aircraft to know where the plane, the guys, what people, enemy was. And we come back from that trip. I was hit by a mortar shell. A mortar shell landed down and knocked me out of commission. And
what is that experience like? Is it just, how would you describe that?
You do that so much that it's just another day's job. And then I was back in the hospital again for about maybe 2 weeks, and then we went for the main crossing of the Po River, and we trained for that for about a week because we had to cross the river by walking. And they didn't tell us the whole story, but anyhow, we practiced throwing hand grenades, rocks that were the size of hand grenades, because we were going to be a close range fire. And what we'd do, we'd have to throw this rock about 75 to 100 feet and get the rock to go into that tire. and we throwed for all day till we could hit that tire. And then that night they said, well, tomorrow morning or tonight at 11 o'clock, you're going to be at the edge of that Po River. And then we waited for the signal to start off. And when we got down into the water, we found the water was solid, dead people. Just like a log jam. So we got into the water and we started pushing our way across. And every time you hear a noise, the Germans would spray the area with machine guns. Just above, maybe a foot or so above the water, you can hear how close the shell is by hearing the snap of the bullet. And so we got across there. You had every time they shoot, you had to duck down between these bodies and to get moving. And then we finally got to the edge of the other far side of the river and bank, and then we waited. And when we got the signal about 5 minutes to 12, midnight, we went up that banks and we shot everything that was there, everything. And we got in, finally a lot of our men were shot, and there were 3 machine gun nests, and we started throwing hand grenades. And we threw hand grenades, we had them hanging on us all over. And we threw them things until till we quit hearing machine gun fire on the other side. And then we went over, a couple of us had to go up and look, scout the area to see for sure that they were all dead. And they were. So then we shot our green flare was a signal that was that we had done it. But out of the 26 of us that went in, there was only 6 of us.
Wow. Should we take a little break?
Anyhow, there was only 6 of us that made it. And 2 of us had been hit at least once or twice with machine gun bullets. And then they immediately came across the river with amphibious bridge that hooks together in sections, and then they drop it. It's made of 50-gallon barrels and planks across that you could drive jeeps and stuff on. And they pushed them over the bodies and over to the far shore. Well, then they relieved us that was left and took us back to the headquarters and give us a rest. And then 2 days later, we started for Milan, Italy. That's the biggest city there.
Before you go there, where did all this take place, that river? Do you remember that?
At Po River in Italy, northern Italy.
Northern Italy.
Over the mountains. It comes out of the mountains, you know, so.
And at what point in this of the war did this happen then?
That was towards the end of it.
It was getting
towards the end, yeah.
Towards the end.
Yeah. And then we had our orders that we were going to go to Milan. That's up the very northern part of Italy. And so we loaded on the trucks and got up there, and we circled the city of Milan with the whole division. At that time we had 4 regiments, 3 regiments of our regular company and 1 regiment of Japanese Americans. And the Japanese Americans wanted to do something for the country, so they said they were willing to have a battalion of their own, a regiment, that would go in front against Germany. But they didn't want to go into Japan with their own people, you might say. And so it made 4 regiments. We circled Milan and started working in. And we went through every building that was there, and the only thing that was left was Italian people themselves, and they were glad to see us. Well, then, after we got almost to the center of Milan, they stopped us, and there was a patrol made up of special service police of Americans and Italians. And they were going in because Mussolini, if you remember, Mussolini was a dictator of Italy. He was in the city center there, and they knew exactly where he was at. So they went in, this party, and got his apartment. They killed all his guards up until they got to his apartment. And when they went in the apartment, he tried to get his gun, and they stabbed him and killed him right there. Well, then he was dragged out and to the balcony, and he was hung upside down by his feet outside of his apartment. And that caused such a disturbance that the military police had to cut him down. And then when the German general of the German 34th Division heard this happened, he surrendered the balance of the German 34th Division to the American 34th Division, and the War of Africa and Italy ended. It was done. And so that's how that went. Then
were you around that area?
Oh yeah, we seen all that happen. We was there. There's 2 guys in Amory that seen that. Me and another guy in Amory. We seen the whole thing. We was right there. He was hanging up. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that was Mussolini.
What were you thinking when you saw that?
Well, you're kind of amazed and almost always interested because he was another just like old Hitler was. See, he joined Hitler as a party, see, and he turned his country over to Hitler. That's how he got in there. Well, then they, after we had about...
Can you hold just a quick second? I just want to make sure this is still going okay. And yep, everything's going well. Great.
Well, then they sent us over a little town by Venice on electric trains. I believe back in the 40s, they had electric trains all over northern Italy that went over the mountains, and we couldn't believe it. So we had a chance to, while we were there at this place by Venice, we had a chance to go up to Lake Como, which was a short distance from the Swiss border, and we seen. Was up, I can't remember the name of it. It was a kind of a retirement city or village for, I suppose, priests and that kind of thing. Well, then they shipped us from there back to Rome on the electric train, and then they loaded us on the troop ship and headed back towards home. And we went down through well, you can see a Rock of Gibraltar in Spain and North Africa, where it goes through there, and then.
Okay, you know what? You got to be real quiet. If you want to listen, you can sit down, but be perfectly quiet. Okay.
Can I see out of the camera?
No.
Oh.
You got to sit down.
And then we headed for 7 days again for New York City, and there was a deportation place there that they discharged us and gave us a ticket to go home. So that was the end of our war business.
So the war wasn't quite over when you were discharged then?
Oh yes, it was over when they finished up with the 34th Division for surrender.
And
That was the end of it. Italy was done then, see? Yeah.
wow.
At this same time, the war from Normandy went across to Germany. That was ending about the same time too. So the two of them had declaration at about the same time.
So both were happening simultaneously, and it was
Yeah.
just while you were part of the war. Did it feel like you were winning? Did it feel like you were being victorious, or was it just it was hard to tell?
No, it was. We'd been at it so long that it was just a part of you that all the time you never thought that you'd ever get out of there alive. You know.
Yeah.
So that's how that happened.
What was it like with just being with the other guys?
Oh, that was fun. That was the enjoyment of after you'd been in the hospital and repaired. That was the fun thing is getting back to your office to see you guys again. Because you never given a thought about home or family or anything because you were trained so long to do your job, and that was it. So that's the only thing we was interested in is going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me what it was like when you came home.
Well, the train, of course, they give us the train, you mean, to go to Chicago and then up to Minneapolis. And then they had the little choo-choo train that went out to Amory, which wasn't, it stopped at every mailbox for it. And yeah, folks were happy to see us, see me. Yeah, I was the first one to come home of the boys. It was I had 4 boys. There were 4 boys in it. See, Clark was in. He's the oldest. He was in the Air Corps, Army Air Corps, and Milton. He was in the Army like I was. He was killed in North Luzon, and Stanley was in the Marine Air Corps, and I was in the Army. Just regular Army. And so then they came home later within the next month or 2, I guess.
Okay.
And
We're going to pause it just a second here.
How are things going? You're done?
Okay, we got to be real quiet. Quiet on the set, right? Quiet on the set. So I want to ask a few more questions about the war. And when you knew you were going into the war, did you have mixed feelings? Were you excited? Were you scared? How did you feel?
well, I say I up until this time in school and all that stuff, I didn't know what to think. But I'm glad I went to service. I was to the point where I started hitting the bottle, and I was smoking, and nothing but parties, and folks were really disgusted with me. So when I got my notice to go in, I kind of was happy. And after I did get in and had gotten through training and the war, I am glad I went. It's the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. I straightened out.
Yeah. You know,
So after I'd been home, actually I got out in 45, and 46, well, shortly after I got out, I met Helen. Best thing ever happened in my life. And in 46, we were married.
sounds like a great day.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about the day you got married?
Well, it was a beautiful warm day in September or November 17th. Really warm, nice day, and we had a wedding dance at what used to be the Country Dam out north of Amory, and we were married in Taylor's Falls at a church there, and just half a dozen of us at that time there. And then I started working in Amory, and I was a bartender, of all things. And the folks bought us a little house out by the school, and we lived out there. And that bartending business lasted about 6 months, and I figured that's no good. I got, at that time from the war, the government gave us what they called a 52-20 club, and they paid us $20 a week for 52 weeks bonus. And that was no good because I spent more than that in the evening, going for one night. See? So I got a job at there was an electric shop but in Amory by the name of Zube Electric, and I went over to see them. And I said, "Yeah," she said, "I'd like to get a job helping you wiring." My dad was an electrician, and I helped him wire some of the houses, and so maybe I could help there. And they put me on, and I worked there for 9.5 years. And starting on that 9 years, the government sent me a notice that I could get 4-year apprenticeship training under Public Law 16 that the government would reimburse the outfit I worked for and pay my salary. So I took the 4-year course and got my card that I was an electrician. And ever since that, I've been wiring probably, well, still do a lot. I just done some today. Only 86 years later. So, and then we.
Can I want to go back for a minute, and then I promise we'll go forward. But I want to go back, and I know it's kind of hard to talk. What was kind of the hardest thing for you? What was the hard part?
The hardest thing, I would say, at one time in the mountains of northern Italy, we had a counterattack from the enemy, and they captured about, we figured 25 of our men. And then they was trying to play a trick, we figured, on us. So they marched these men across an open space, across the farm, an open space, and they had machine guns on both sides, and one ahead and one behind. And when they got out into the open space, they wanted us to fire and shoot. But our leader said, "Hold your fire." There we was. We had the trigger ready, the thing was loaded, and we were ready to shoot these guys' machine guns, and they said, "Hold your fire." Well, that was the hardest thing. But we figured the reason that they ordered that was because they figured prisoners would be having a better chance of getting through alive if they took them to a concentration camp rather than being shot by them guys with machine guns. That's what they wanted us to do. But that was probably there.
What did you know about Hitler, or what while the war was going on? What stories did you hear about Hitler? Or
Well, his worst thing was he was trying to extinguish the Jews, and he shot them by the hundreds in the concentration camps, and that was probably the worst.
did you know that was going on while the war was happening?
Oh yeah, sure. Right.
Tell me.
That's right. We figured he'd be taking these men of ours, but we didn't know.
So you knew that was going on during the war?
Oh yes.
They'd tell you about it?
Yeah, we had a daily paper they called the. What the heck? What's the name of that paper? It was a paper that's made up back in the headquarters, and they give you all the news reports of what's going on in different areas, and They couldn't tell you where we were going, but they could tell you stuff that had happened.
So, what was the process like where you would find out what you were going to be doing? Sometimes it was just the next day you're going to do this.
Yes, always never told you ahead of time. No. If they needed a patrol for a night patrol, or they had two kinds of patrols, reconnaissance patrol and a combat patrol. Now, reconnaissance patrol, these are behind the lines, behind German lines. Reconnaissance patrol is to find information of what the enemy had and where they were located, and then you had to rotate, turn that in. Sometimes you'd be gone 2-3 days behind the German lines. And the combat patrol was that you had to go out, say there was an ammunition dump or some big thing like that out a couple miles. They wanted to go out there, and our job was to see that got exploded and set it on fire and try to get out of there. You had to, sometimes you had to shoot your way back to your own lines and hope that our men recognized us.
Sometimes you'd be in foxholes and stuff like that.
Oh, yes.
Talk about what that was like.
When we were in Angel Beachhead, we were in foxholes all the time there. See, the mountain, that was a spot that was 10 acres, big around, not 10 acres, 10 miles. And it had mountains on 3 sides and the ocean on the 4th backside. And we were up within 500 yards of the front of the German lines in foxholes. These foxholes were dug about 3.5 feet deep and 6 feet long. And they usually try to pair us out in 2 small guys or 2 big ones, so you could, so the big one could sleep in the ground. And it was only about 4 feet wide, and then you covered half of the end that was towards the enemy. And the reason for that, if they'd shoot their shells, it would, if they hit in that end, it wouldn't hurt nothing, see? But we had them covered with logs and grass and whatever you could do. And then if you'd stay on the other end, well, they could have hit you with a shell, see? And you stayed in there all day long. You couldn't move because they could see you from all these mountains around. They could see everything going on. Every time they'd see something, they'd shoot out their artillery shells and machine guns out to try and knock you out. So,
was it cold sometimes too?
Yeah, cold. It was cold and wet. And we went 6 weeks one time without changing clothes or wash or bath or nothing. And you had a little bit of like a Bunsen burner that you could heat your sea rations. These sea rations were small canned foods, all we had. And but this Bunsen burner, you could put this coffee powder in the water, which is in your canteen. You put in that cup, set it over there, and then it'd boil the coffee, and then you cover it up again, put the burner back in your pack, and you drink your coffee and eat your canned food, which was dehydrated potatoes, or it was different kinds of dehydrated vegetables and stuff like that. It was never a hot meal at that time. So some of the guys were so they had trench feet from their feet, even wet all the time, and it was a mess.
What was? I'm gonna pause it. So, what do you remember? Like a moment when it was kind of the scariest for you or the hardest? What?
What?
Was there a moment during the war when it was probably the scariest or the hardest for you?
Well, I would say probably the first time I got hit by that artillery shell. I started running, and the guy on top of the tank hollered, "You're going the wrong way." So I turned around and I went down the mountain the other way I was supposed to have gone. And when I got halfway down the mountain way, I dropped my pack and rifle and kept on going. And I got down to the bottom. Why the Germans had a big gun thing built into the side of the mountain that they could push their artillery gun out, and they could shoot over for miles all over our area. And then our men, when they took that over, they automatically made that into an aid station. And that's where they had, there must have been hundreds of guys in there that were wounded, see? And then they could close this door and you couldn't, it was camouflaged so you couldn't see it. Well, anyhow, after they patched me up and I come to, I started to get up and they hollered, "Where you going? You can't go no place." I said, "I got to go back up there. I left my pack up there." He said, "Well, what do you want a pack for?" I said, "I got it full of souvenirs." And he said, "What did you have in it?" I said, "Well, I had a German officer's pistol, a Luger, German Luger, a beautiful gun and holster. I had the German's mess kit with all the cutlery and the drinking bottle and the case for it. And I had German compass. It was an oil-filled compass with luminous dial." And I said, "That's about twice the size of a pocket watch." Years ago, they used to have a pocket watch with a chain that went around and up in the other pocket. Well, it's about that big around. And the cover opened up and it had luminous dial. You could see in the dark what compass would read, see? And I had a whole bunch of stuff like that. He says, "If somebody found that, you ain't going to get it back." He said, "That's gone. You just stay right where you are. We don't have any extra blood to give you, so you just stay right there." And that was it. I never got to see it. I really wanted that stuff. So I shot that German officer and took his gun and all that stuff when he... Yeah, that was probably that busted my balloon.
Well, great. Let's see, why don't I'm going to pause.
Yeah.
Do you remember your grandparents at all?
Yes, yes.
What do you remember about your grandparents? Anything you can tell me?
Well, they came over from Sweden, and came over to St. Paul, and they worked on the streetcar lines, motorman streetcar lines, and then my dad found that there was a farm over in Wisconsin that they could buy. So then they moved over to Wisconsin into Goose Lake area and started farming. And grandparents, they came out to Wisconsin and Bear Lake and started farming there. And they farmed there for seemed like forever, but about 40 years, I suppose, 50.
What were they like?
Well, he was quite a jolly guy. Always, just like you remember that time we done Irene and Roy's story. She told about the time they had two horses and went to St. Croix, and one of them died on the way, not too far from home, and he got out and got a hold of the neck yoke and held it up and followed along with the other horse and got the wagon home. And he was quite a card, if I remember. She was quite quiet, quite sturdy. I mean, she didn't do too much fooling there, but she was a very good cook and good home and everything.
Do you
Yeah.
remember hearing any stories of them coming over when they came from Sweden? Anything
No,
you ever
no,
talked about it?
No, they didn't do any picture taking or anything like that, see? So I don't know, I can't say.
Anything about where they were from in Sweden or what?
Yes, there was a town by the name of Yankham. That's north of, what's that big town in Sweden?
Stockholm?
Huh?
Stockholm? Oslo?
Oslo.
No, that's Norway. I'm sorry. That's Norway.
No, it
Stockholm,
was,
Sweden.
anyhow, it was farming country at wherever this little town. I can't remember the name of the big city that they were by, but anyhow.
Did they come over by on a boat then?
Oh yeah, on boat. Yeah.
How old? Do you remember how old they were or anything that?
No, that's.
Not sure.
I couldn't say. They must have been quite young because the children are all born in Minnesota.
So were they married when they came
Oh
over?
yeah. No, they weren't married at the time they came over. He came over first, and got a job in St. Paul working, and then he saved enough money to send over so she could come over, and she came over, and then they got married. See?
Okay, great.
And on my mother's side, they came from I believe it was Norway, and about the same time must have been, and they came to Bear Lake, or not Bear Lake, it was You Bet, the town of You Bet, and they farmed there also.
Oh, do you remember anything about them? What they were like? Or
No, her mother died shortly after they had came over here, I guess, and then the father raised the family. Yeah,
did he ever remarry then, or
no.
didn't remarry? Okay. What's your favorite memory, kind of growing up when you were a little guy, when you were a little boy,
Favorite memory?
or memories? Any favorite kind of memories when you were young, in the summer or in the winter? Or...
Probably the favorite memories would probably be when we went to grade school. We skipped school a lot and went up to the lake swimming. You didn't hear that. The teacher, she'd always get us heck when he finally come back to school, but wasn't too long we was down there again. There was some people that had a boat that lived on that lake, and at that time it was all rowboats. And he used to tie up his boat down by the lake back of the barn, and we found that out, and we'd go over there and sneak around and see where he was first, and then if he was gone, then we'd take his boat, and we'd row across the lake, and then we got done playing around the lake with it, where we'd have to leave the boat over there because we didn't dare bring it back, see? And he said, then doggone, Erickson's been over here and got my boat again. It was a lot of fun.
It was better than going to school, huh?
Oh yeah, I beat that all to pieces.
You didn't hear that, Alec, right?
What?
Don't skip school like Grandpa.
I will.
Oh, oh,
Yeah.
that's good. Well, I think anything else you want to share at all? Just anything from your heart that you want to kind of.
No.
Anything we didn't talk about, or
We used to go to the Country Dam nightclub, which was out north of town. We used to go there on Saturday nights. That was Saturday. At that time, Saturday night was the big night. And they had old time dances and parties and a lot of fun. Yeah. Everybody around that area would go there.
Was that right after you got married then that you did that a lot?
Oh, before yet.
Oh, before you got
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was only like, 2-3 miles from where we lived, see. And I had an old, which was fairly new at that time, Model T pickup. We used to drive that over there and pick up 3-4 kids on the way and go over there. They weren't too strict at that time on kids drinking. Because if you was big enough to reach up on top of the bar and drop some money on it, they'd sell it to you.
Wasn't there a story about going for a ride in an airplane or something? Who was that story about? Was that Helen?
Oh yeah, well, Stan and I used to go to the place they call Tipperary. They had a nightclub and 4th of July celebration, and they always had a couple of these here two-wing airplanes, 2-seaters, and they give airplane rides. They didn't give them. At that time, you got an airplane ride for 20 minutes for $1. So the folks would always give us $1 so we could get a plane ride. And that's how we got started, and Stanley got started in airplanes too. He made model airplanes from then until he got into service. He had model airplanes all over the place. Beautiful ones too. He really could put them together. And then he got started in making airplanes before he went into service. And when he came out, he was in service, he was in the Marine Air Corps. And he went to Spartan Air College in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and went to school there on mechanics for modern airplanes. And they would, the school would buy used airplanes from the government, and they'd take them to this school, and they'd completely tear them down and overhaul everything on that needed it. And then they'd sell them to the students. And for the next class started, they bought another bunch of old planes in and they'd overhaul them. Well, Stanley bought one of them, and then he flew that from Tulsa, Oklahoma, up to Amory Airport. And the airport at that time was outside of about 5 miles out of Amory. So that's how he really got into the airport business.
Did he ever take Helen for a ride in the plane or some story?
You do what?
Did he ever take Helen for a ride in the airplane? And she got
I
scared
don't
or
think
something?
that's what I remember of.
Okay. It was for
I
something.
remember
something.
he took my dad one time, and he overshot the airstrip, see? He was coming in too fast, and then he shot up in the air, and my dad got sick, and he vomited all over the back seat of the airplane, and he had a hell of a mess. Yeah. And then he sold the plane after he got into living in Minneapolis, because it was too costly to fly back and forth, and then he had to tie down out of an oak private planes out there, and then get back into the city again in order to go back to work, because he worked at Northwest Airlines, mechanic, see.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check because I think. Yeah, I got just 5 more minutes here. What can you tell me about your folks? What were they like, and anything at all you can share?
Oh, well, they were big people, quite heavy set, both of them. And mother had a big garden, and she worked in that. And at that time, in those times, everybody had to have a garden in order to make a living, because there was no money coming in, and what money you got was a little bit for the milk. And my dad was a big farmer. Probably had one of the bigger farms in that area, and he was a hard worker. So we didn't have much fooling around time at home. When we got home from school, it was working until supper time, and then we had to do chores, and everything at that time was, of course, pulling them by hand. And, and then clean out the barns by hand and everything.
What as a family do you have any memories of things you did for kind of fun? Anything with music or do anything?
Well, the only thing I can remember is that line would be like the church we went to. Then summertime they'd have a church picnic at Lake Wapagasset. And then they had all the kids, they'd fix up a sandbox where they'd throw change in there and the kids trying to find the money. And they had boat rides, and it was quite interesting, quite a lot of fun.
Great.
And they could go swimming, and them days you made your own fun, because they didn't have all these modern things.
Yeah, no TV or
No.
this radio.
The radios we had was a wind charger on the roof, generator that would generate enough so you could have a couple lights, or if you wanted to listen to the radio, we had them small radios. You could use it charge a battery, and then you could use the radio, and then you had to turn the other stuff off. So,
Do you remember the first time you saw a TV?
oh, that was years later. Yeah, that was years later. The first television that came out in that area was a Helicrafter company, and they had small ones, real, just a little bit like that. You had everybody to sit in front of it and watch it. That was really something if you had one of them. But then they started getting bigger, so you could see them.
Great. Well, thank you.